Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. It's early February in New Hampshire. I garden in zone 5B. Join me today as I show you how I pre-sprout my Ranunculus Corms, as well as revive my dormant geraniums. I like to do both of these because both ranunculus as well as geraniums are considered annuals in my zone. And rather than just throw them away at the end of each season, I like to see how I can overwinter them from year to year. This is my second year growing ranunculus. It is a beautiful, cool weather flower that blooms in either the spring or early summer. It resembles a rose, which makes it look even more beautiful. And I'm going to pop a picture on the screen that shows you one of my ranunculus flowers in blossom last spring. I overwintered the corms of my ranunculus in brown paper bags, similar to this one here, and I stored the corms in my garage. The garage stays between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a perfect temperature. In mid-February, which is about right now, is when it's a perfect time to pre-sprout your ranunculus corms. Step one is to soak the shriveled up octopus-looking corms in room temperature water. You want to do this for about 3 hours. You don't want to do it longer than 3 hours because there is a chance that you can rot out the corms. I'm going to show you what one of the corms looks like. And it pretty much looks like like I said, it looks like nothing really. It's just dried up, shriveled little, on the internet, a lot of people say it looks like an octopus. That's all it looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour all the corms in a bowl. And it doesn't matter how big your bowl is. You just want to make sure that you get all of them in there. And then you want to go ahead and pour the water in the bowl. And again, this is just room temperature water that I have here that I got from my tap. And then pretty much at this point, we just play the waiting game. And after 3 hours, I'll show you what the next step is with what we do with these corms. Well, 3 hours have passed for the ranunculus corms to be sitting in the water. And I wanted to mention a couple of things. The first thing is that right now, if you go to some of the big box stores or your local nursery, you might be able to find some ranunculus corms for sale. Even though I'm using corms that I overwintered from last year, you can still go ahead at this time in February or even March and purchase them in stores or even online. The other thing that I wanted to mention was when I soaked these corms, I just kept the water as is for 3 hours. I didn't change the water out. I also didn't add any trickling of water to the bowl. I know that on the internet, some sites do mention that. So do what works for you. But in the past year or two, when I've done this process, I haven't had to do any of those steps. I've just kept the water on the corms for 3 hours, and it hasn't been a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few things. I want to show you that the corms have plumped up a little bit. Let me find a good one here. Okay, actually I'll show you a couple. Let's do this. So they have plumped up quite a bit from before, and they've changed color. Before they were like a dark gray color, and now they're a light brown. And they've probably doubled in size. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to go about preparing the corms for where they're going to be for the next 2 weeks. The first thing is this right here is called a 10 by 20 tray. You can really use any sort of container to put these corms in. I just like to use a 10 by 20 tray. And in case you're wondering why we call it a 10 by 20, it's 10 inches going this way by 20 inches going this way. So that's a standard 10 by 20 tray that I'm going to use for this demonstration. And there are no holes in the bottom of this tray. You don't want to have holes in the bottom since basically the corms are just going to be sitting in here for 2 weeks. You're not going to be adding too much water to them. You don't want them to rot out. You can add a little bit of water, but not a lot. I have pre-moistened potting mix over here, and I'm using Pro Mix. You can use whatever potting mix that you like, but I prefer Pro Mix. And I've already added some water into it. And you can see it's holding its form very nicely. That means it's wet, but not too wet. And you want to go ahead and put about 1 inch of the potting mix into your tray or your container. Okay, that's about 1 inch. And just spread it around. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then after you've done that, you want to go ahead and place the corms into the tray. They can be placed nice and tight inside the tray. They don't need to space them out a certain amount of inches. And the reason for that is because they're only going to live in this tray for about 2 weeks until they've started to show signs of life and start sprouting. So you can put them in nice and tight in the tray, and then when you plant them out in your garden or in containers, then you can take the time to separate them and move them where they need to go. So in order to do this, what I'm doing here is I'm taking each of the corms, and I'll call them the legs. I want the legs to be facing down. So pretend it's like a little octopus. And you can hold, basically I'm holding where the stem of the old plant used to be. I'm holding that, and I'm just placing it in here. And I'll go ahead and complete this whole process. And when I'm done, I'll show you what comes next after this. Okay, that looks like that's that. I want to mention a few other small items. The first one being that when I bought these corms a few years ago, I literally only had maybe 6 or 8 corms that came in my package. And then they multiplied, and this is why I have so many. So it's definitely a good investment if you buy your first package and you plant them out in your garden or in pots, and then in the fall, bring them in the winter, overwinter them. You can save yourself a lot of money. And they're very easy to divide. I plan on dividing these corms when I dig them up later this season. And I'll be sure to show you how I do that. So, and also I also wanted to mention that the water is pretty dirty, but that's because when I dug up the corms from last season, there was still a little bit of dirt on them. But when you buy them in the store, your water will not be this dirty. It's totally fine though, it's not a problem. So the next thing you want to do is put another 1-inch layer of potting mix on top of the corms. So I'm going to do that now. I have a nice big bowl that I use. You can use whatever you want for your potting mix, but this works for me. It's so much fun to watch the corms come to life in a couple of weeks. The root system is amazing. Okay, so now that those are all covered, I'm just going to press lightly on here, like that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these corms, or this tray, in a dark location that stays about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And the perfect place for that for me is in my garage. But a lot of times people will put the corms in their basement for 2 weeks. So find a nice place where they'll stay dry and cool, and they'll stay there for 2 weeks. Check them just to make sure that they don't get dried out. You just want the soil to be moist. And then after 2 weeks, the corms are ready to be either planted out in your garden, or you can pot them up into containers. You don't want to bring them out in your garden if it's still freezing temperatures at night. You want to make sure that you're putting them in some sort of warm environment. So what I plan on doing is just potting these up after 2 weeks into individual 3-inch containers and keeping them inside and letting them grow to a nice large size, and then I will bring them out after my final frost, which is in mid-May. For the last many years, I've been growing my geranium from seed that I've collected from my very own geranium plants. While this method has worked for me, it has pros and cons to it. One of the pros is that I'm saving a lot of money by not buying my own geranium plants. And I'm also not buying my own seed. I'm just collecting my own seed. But one major con of growing geranium from seed is that it takes a very long time. I typically have to start my geranium seeds in December, and I have to wait until mid-May before I can actually plant the geranium plants. Last year, I really wanted to overwinter my geranium plants indoors. I really didn't want to bring the plants and put them in pots because I worried that I might be bringing in bugs no matter how good I tried to clean off the plant and the roots. I also didn't want to have to keep the plants under grow lights. I don't have very sunny windows in my house, so grow lights was the only option. And I didn't feel like running grow lights all winter long. Also, it would just have to be one more plant that I had to water. So in order to avoid doing all that work, what I did was I looked on the internet and I found a number of resources that said that you can overwinter your geraniums by putting them through dormancy. And one way of doing that is to take the geranium and put it in a paper bag, just like this. So the steps that I took to overwinter my geranium plants were as follows. I dug up the plants in the fall time before my first frost. I cleaned off all the roots by just knocking off all the dirt and washing the roots with water. And then I let the plant dry for a day or two. After that, I took each plant and I put it upside down in a paper bag, just like this one here. And I put a rubber band around the base of the plant. So notice that the roots are right here, and that means the top of the plant is at the bottom of the bag. I had about probably 15 or so plants, and I stored them in my basement, which stays cool at about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And I stored them down there throughout the winter. And now that it's mid-February, my goal is to bring them out of dormancy. And I want to pot them up. Now that I have my grow lights on and I have other seedlings started, I figured it's a great time to also pot up my geraniums and get them started. So the first step is I'm going to take the rubber band off my plant, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. And you can see right away that there is some growth here at the base of the plant, right where the roots are. It doesn't look like much. It actually looks pretty sad, this plant, but it is alive, and that's the key, is that it did survive the winter. So what we want to do is we want to remove all the dead leaves from the plant. And it's totally fine to take them off because it's going to regrow and send off new shoots off this plant. And I'm just going to feel it to see if it's soft or like mushy on any parts of the plant. And some parts of it do feel soft to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this right here where it's starting to feel soft. I have a scissor over on the side here, so I just grab that. You can use any scissor that you have. So it feels soft right here, so that's where I'm going to cut it. And what will happen is, even though I'm going to plant the plant down at this area here, it's going to send the shoots up from the pot. So what I have over here on the right is I have a bowl of potting mix, and I like to use Pro Mix. You really can use any potting mix that you like to use. You can even use seed starting mix, although I would recommend potting mix. And you want to make sure you pre-moisten it with water. And what I mean by that is, if you notice, when I go like this with my hand with the soil, it forms a nice clump. And so that shows that it's nice and wet. It's not too wet. It's not dripping wet. And it's also not too dry. So what I'll do is, let me take this out, and I'll fill it to about halfway of the pot. And this pot is a 3-inch pot. You can use whatever size pot you like, depending on the size of your geranium. And I will leave a little bit of the green exposed. There is a little tiny bit of green showing right here, and some green here as well. And what the plant will do is it will just send those shoots up towards the light. So again, the plant doesn't look like much right now, but give it some time and you will have a beautiful geranium plant. So what I will do is, now I will put this plant under my grow light, and I plan to show you updates in the next few weeks of what my geranium plants look like. So I just went ahead and got a sample of a geranium that I took out of dormancy about 2 weeks ago. And you can tell it looks so much better than the geranium plant that I just showed you. So that's what all the plants will eventually look like. And my goal is, once the plants get big enough, before they actually go out in May, I hope to take some cuttings off of those plants and root additional geraniums from those plants. I will be sure to show you those videos as well. I am so excited to get my hands into a little bit of dirt. It's been a very long winter, and just doing this makes the winter go by so much quicker. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me as I pot up the ranunculus that I pre-sprouted with you today, as well as to follow the progress on the geraniums that came out of dormancy. Finally, make it a great day with gardening.